This road right here was used by the Germans as an improvised airstrip in the latter stages of World War II, when the Soviets nearly captured Berlin late April. The last flight flew out of Berlin via this road. On board was a German aviator. Her name was Hanna Reitsch. This here is a story of the last flight out of Berlin, 1945.
Good to have you back on the channel. If you're new, my name is Stefan. I'm a Dutch history teacher and I make videos about history for you. If you like that, please consider subscribing and don't forget to hit the notification bell. Let's start. Hanna Reitsch was one of Nazi Germany's poster girls and served as a test pilot for military aircraft. She received several decorations, which was unusual for a woman in the Third Reich. Born on March 29, 1912, she developed a fascination with flying at a young age, which inspired her to become a pilot. Driven by her desire to experience the sensation of flight, she is said to have jumped off her balcony at the age of just 4. In her 1955 autobiography, Reitsch described her passion for flying as follows. The longing grew in me, grew with every bird I saw flying through the azure summer sky, with every cloud that drifted past me on the wind, until it turned into a deep, persistent yearning, a longing that followed me everywhere and could never be stilled. Despite her dream of becoming a pilot, her father wanted her to study medicine. Reitsch agreed and began her medical studies, but still managed to obtain her pilot's license in 1932. She saw a compromise in becoming a flying doctor, which would satisfy both herself and her father. To pursue this goal, she enrolled at the flight school for powered aircraft in Staaken near Berlin. Her determination and flying talent led her over the following months to break several flight records, including a women's endurance record of 5.5 hours in 1933. Reitsch left medical school to become a full-time gliding instructor. She set several unofficial flying records and conducted thermal research during an expedition in South America, where she became the first woman to receive the Silver Sea Badge. This award is given to glider pilots who have gained at least 1,000 meters in altitude, completed a 5-hour flight, and flown a straight line distance of at least 50 kilometers. Back in Germany, she joined the German Institute for Glider Research and set multiple records during her flights, including being the first woman to fly a glider across the Alps. In 1937, Reitsch joined the Luftwaffe, serving as a test pilot for military aircraft. Although she only carried out test flights and never participated in combat, she did have the opportunity to visit the front once, in February 1943. After the news of Germany's defeat in the Battle of Stalingrad, she received an invitation from Colonel General Robert Ritter von Greim to visit the Eastern Front. There she spent 3 weeks visiting various Luftwaffe units. In addition to her flying career, Reitsch also became a prominent figure in Nazi propaganda. Starting in 1937, she embodied the ideal Aryan image promoted by Hitler, with her blonde hair, blue eyes, slim figure and radiant smile, which made her a frequent appearance in Nazi propaganda material. Hanna had a similar view of Hitler, always looking for a father figure in her life. She made Hitler her ultimate paternal guide, affectionate and generous to her, kind and ready to promote her dreams. He was everything a girl could want. Not long after receiving the Iron Cross Second Class from Adolf Hitler in March 1941 for her courageous efforts in testing Luftwaffe aircraft, disaster struck. During a test flight, the cockpit of the Messerschmitt 163 rocket plane was found to be poorly suited to someone of Reitsch's size. The aircraft became nearly uncontrollable. Reitsch decided to attempt a landing. She nearly succeeded, but at the last moment the aircraft crashed. She survived, but suffered serious injuries, including 6 skull fractures. After the accident, Reitsch was awarded a special version of the Gold Medal for Military Flying. She later also received the Iron Cross First Class. Despite her injuries, she resumed flying after 5 months in hospital. Toward the end of World War II, plans emerged to convert the V-1 flying bomb into a manned weapon. The idea was born during a lunch Reitsch had with friends in Berlin. As the conversation turned to how Germany might be saved from what was seen as inevitable defeat, the group proposed carrying out airstrikes on strategic Allied targets using pilots willing to sacrifice themselves. The concept became known as Operation Selbstopfer, self-sacrifice. In late 1943, Reitsch had the opportunity to discuss Operation Selbstopfer directly with Hitler during a ceremony in Berchtesgaden, where she received the Iron Cross First Class. After some persistence, she eventually received Hitler's reluctant approval to continue experimental work on the condition that he be spared the details. The project was assigned to General Günther Korten, but despite around 70 volunteer pilots for the kamikaze bombs, Reitsch's plan was never put into action. A man that also became important in Reitsch's life was Robert Ritter von Greim, a World War I flying ace that would be appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Luftwaffe, German Air Force, by Hitler in April 1945 after Hermann Göring had fallen out of grace. Born in 1892 in Bavaria, Greim had started his military career as a junior officer during the early days of World War I. He later joined the German Air Service and got his first combat victory in 1915 by shooting down an enemy plane while working as an artillery observer. By 1917, he was flying fighter planes and earned the Iron Cross on the same day he shot down another aircraft. He eventually became the commander of his fighter unit and became known as a flying ace, a skilled fighter pilot. And by the end of the war, he had 28 confirmed kills. After the war, von Greim couldn't find a place in the reduced German army, so he studied law and passed the tough exams. But his real passion was flying. When he got the chance to help build a Chinese air force, he moved to Canton with his family to teach flying. However, von Greim held racist beliefs and didn't think highly of his Chinese students, believing they couldn't fly as well as Europeans. Unhappy, he returned to Germany just as the Nazi movement was gaining popularity. Von Greim was drawn to Hitler's ideas and became a strong supporter. He even joined Hitler's failed attempt to take over the government in Munich, 1923. Because of his loyalty and experience, Nazi leader Hermann Göring chose von Greim in 1933 to help rebuild the German Air Force. In 1934, he was put in charge of the first official fighter pilot school. Over the next 10 years, he rose through the ranks and became a field marshal. When Hanna Reitsch met him in 1936, he was still training pilots, neither of them knowing how closely their lives would later be connected. In April 1945, Hanna Reitsch visited her hometown of Hirsberg for the last time. Once a celebrated hero, she now found the streets empty and silent, awaiting the Soviet onslaught. She took one final look at her old home, knowing she'd never return. She then went to Salzburg to see her family, spending a day with them despite the looming end of the war. On April 25th, Hanna received a call from General von Greim. Hitler had summoned him to the Führerbunker in Berlin, an extremely dangerous mission. By that time, the Soviets were advancing through the city's districts, and much of the city was now an active battlefield. Von Greim asked Hanna to fly him in, trusting her skills and knowledge of Berlin's air routes. Some later claimed Hanna insisted on joining to see Hitler one last time. Together, they flew to Berlin. Since the aircraft Hanna planned to use was destroyed, they squeezed into a cramped fighter plane, a Focke-Wulf FW-190. Hanna stuffed into the back, barely able to move. The flight was dangerous, dodging Soviet planes and gunfire. At some point, the pilot dived suddenly to avoid an attack. Hanna, thinking they'd been hit, braced for death, but they landed safely at Gatow. Von Greim then planned to fly closer to the bunker. Their only option was a light plane, the Fieseler Fi 156 Storch. As they approached Berlin, Soviet fire hit them and von Greim was wounded in the foot. Hanna took control of the plane and despite heavy attacks managed to land near the Brandenburg Gate, where an improvised airstrip was in operation. They were escorted to Hitler's bunker. Inside the complex, many wondered why the Führer stayed in doomed Berlin. While it made no military sense, Hitler believed leaving would be cowardly. He had grown paranoid, angry and obsessed with death. Goebbels encouraged him to remain, to die like a Roman emperor with his people, unlike the Kaiser who had fled in 1918. In the bunker's final days, Nazi leaders clung to dreams of heroic death and future myths, even as their world collapsed. Hitler had chosen General Colonel Ritter von Greim, a loyal officer, to replace Göring. Hitler had summoned him to Berlin, a dangerous and ultimately pointless journey. Hanna Reitsch was not prepared for what she found in the bunker. At the entrance, Magda Goebbels broke down crying and hugged her. Moments later, Hitler appeared, frail, twitching, and with lifeless eyes. He greeted them with a flat voice. Von Greim, injured during the flight, gave his report to Hitler. Hitler, trying to remain in control, shouted about Göring's betrayal and appointed von Greim as Field Marshal and head of the Luftwaffe on the spot. He called Hanna brave, grateful that someone still showed loyalty. Hanna had to remain in the bunker. The plane they had arrived in was damaged beyond repair, and there was no fuel. Escaping by car or on foot was nearly impossible, with Red Army troops closing in and roads destroyed. Hanna knew what Soviet capture would mean. At best, she would be imprisoned or sent to a Soviet camp. Given those options, staying with von Greim under SS protection seemed safer. Meanwhile, the Red Army had zeroed in on the Reich Chancellery and shelling intensified. Even deep underground, explosions shook the bunker and knocked plaster from the ceilings. Cut off from the world, its residents clung to illusions of rescue. Hitler talked about secret armies preparing to strike and wonder weapons that would turn the tide. Hanna saw through the disillusions, and she later wrote that the level of self-deception in the bunker was incredible. Rumors flew constantly. People dreamed of rescue, though none would come. The war was nearly over, and for Hanna, the dream of the German Reich was crumbling. She watched, disillusioned, as even Hitler continued to believe in fantasies of victory, fantasies she knew were already lost. On April 27th, a Ju-52 plane made a dangerous flight into Berlin to collect General von Greim. But he refused to leave. The plane returned empty. Hanna was stuck. She couldn't leave without von Greim's permission, and he didn't give it. Hanna wrote in her autobiography as if she chose to stay out of loyalty to Hitler. But in truth, she had no real choice. Von Greim was her only way out, and she had to stay with him. When the plane returned, Hanna was called to Hitler's study. She realized Hitler was worn out and weak, barely holding on to the hope that German forces would save Berlin. Hitler refused to leave. He believed that his presence in the city would inspire his troops to fight on. Hanna retreated from the gloomy bunker to von Greim's room. He was in pain from a serious foot injury and needed hospital care, but he had committed to staying with Hitler. He knew the Soviet forces would soon take the bunker, and he planned to kill himself before that happened. Some have speculated that Hanna and von Greim were lovers, but that seems unlikely. Von Greim was married and deeply honorable. Hanna had very strict views about relations and had turned down a lover in the past because of religious guilt. People who saw them together said they had a deep friendship. Hanna admired von Greim as a mentor and father figure, someone to protect and support her, as Hitler no longer was that figure. Just after midnight, on April 29th, Hitler came to von Greim's room. His face was pale and he looked exhausted. He told them, "Now Himmler has betrayed me," and ordered them to leave the bunker quickly. There was a small plane waiting for them, and von Greim was supposed to lead an air attack. She didn't believe Hitler's plan could work. She had seen the destruction outside, the burned out roads, the Russian tanks and troops, and how little was left of the German Air Force. But she did want to leave. She had hoped to escape on the Ju-52 and didn't want to die underground in the bunker. Still, she didn't want to risk her life for a hopeless cause either. Hanna said goodbye to the Goebbels family and left with Hitler's final words to her: "God protect you." Von Greim, in pain, limped out of the bunker with Hanna and von Below. The three found an armed car and made their way through the ruins, hoping not to run into Soviet troops. They were lucky. When they reached the airfield, they found the same brave pilot who had flown them in earlier. He flew them out safely, landing at Reichlin around 3 a.m. The airfield was mostly empty, but von Greim tried to organize a final desperate air attack, though it was hopeless. Hanna became von Greim's personal escort, helping him to travel to meet top Nazi leaders like Admiral Dönitz and Field Marshal Keitel. While in Lübeck, they learned that Hitler had killed himself on April 30th. Many of his followers soon followed his example. Dönitz had become the new leader of what remained of Germany. Von Greim wanted to get to his command in Bohemia, but his injured foot put him in the hospital for 4 days. While there, he heard that Germany would surrender on May 9th. On the morning of May 9th, Reitsch brought von Greim to the hospital in Kitzbühel. The same afternoon, she was arrested by the Americans based on information from a British officer. After 2 days of interrogation by American military intelligence officers, during which she was questioned about Hitler's order for her to leave the Führerbunker on April 29th, 1945, she stated, "It was the blackest day when we could not die at the side of our Führer." After a prolonged interrogation, Reitsch was cleared of any involvement in war crimes, and after 15 months in captivity, she was released. After her release, Reitsch settled in Frankfurt, but for a long time she was not allowed to pursue her passion. In the post-war period, German civilians were prohibited from flying both powered and glider aircraft. However, within a few years, gliding was once again permitted, and she resumed her activity. She became a gliding instructor and began teaching across Europe. She continued to break records and was even invited in 1961 by US President John F. Kennedy to be a guest at the White House in Washington, D.C. Even after the war, she reportedly continued to wear her decorations with pride and wrote somewhat defensive memoirs. In a 1970s interview, she declared, "I am not ashamed to say that I believed in National Socialism. I still wear the Iron Cross with diamonds that Hitler gave me." Hanna Reitsch died on August 24th, 1979 in Frankfurt. If you want to learn about the last Nazi government, known as the Dönitz or Flensburg government, click here. Thanks for watching.